Everybody. So welcome. Thank you for attending or applying for a New Jersey hemp license. We're joined today by a number of our members of the New Jersey Hemp Facebook group, and we've got Preston Hall, Rosemarie Gaetano, Bill Bamka, Shirali Patel, and Ed Tobias with us right now. And we're going to start off our meeting right now with a few words of wisdom, but a little overview from Shirali Patel. So Shirali, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Connie. You know what I'll do? I'll share my screen because I have a few slides that I can share.
And we're being very informal here. With the idea here is that we want to create community and kind of make it a little bit informal and share our knowledge. So take it away. I can see your screen.
You can see this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let me see if I can make it bigger. Does that work though for everybody? Just want to make sure you guys can at least see the
Works for me.
text. Okay. So I thought let me start with this because if you're familiar with or unfamiliar with the New Jersey Hemp Program, there's only a few categories of licenses or applications that are available. And those are for hemp producers, right? Similar to processors, they're for growers and they're for handlers. And so a grower license is self-explanatory, right? It's anybody that wants to cultivate hemp. The producers, also kind of self-explanatory. It's anybody that wants to process hemp and turn it into products. The tricky application and license and the broadest one is for a handler. So the way that a handler is defined by New Jersey is it's anybody who possesses or stores a hemp plant on their premises or in a vehicle. So examples are including, traders, brokers, seed cleaners, labs, basically any service provider that's not actually physically cultivating or processing the hemp materials. I get a lot of questions because there's a lot of groups out in Pennsylvania, for example, or upstate New York that are already cultivating hemp and they want to sell their product in New Jersey. And so they'll ask me, well, I'm already registered in my state, can I come out here and do it? Well, legally you can, but you need to register and apply to be a handler. So that's just a caveat because if you're already doing that, fair warning, it's technically not legal unless you actually apply for an application. If anybody's familiar with the cannabis licenses and the medical round that have been issued, those are very comprehensive. You had to submit, background checks. You had to have an entire plan on what was your diversity going to look like, security, like several different components. The application for hemp is completely different. It's actually easy to read. The Department of Agriculture did a really good job by putting the application online, having FAQs available, and they're really accessible. And so that's the one thing that I like about what New Jersey has done. And let me go back a little bit. So this is just basics. I don't need to go over, that the Hemp Farming Act was passed. I'm assuming everybody that's listening right now is, well aware that we've had this for over a year now. There's the one thing that's interesting is New Jersey's always accepting applications on a rolling basis. And so it's not like in with the cannabis licenses where there's a RFA round and then you have a deadline. With hemp, at any point you decide, okay, I have property and I have my investment and infrastructure ready, you can apply and there's no cap. So the state hasn't said we're only gonna award like 100, handlers licenses or grow licenses. It's really open right now. And the last time that I checked with the Department of Agriculture, they had given out 51 licenses total. So maybe it looks different now, but it's a public process. So you can do an Oprah and find out, who's already been awarded. And it may be somebody because you'd be surprised. People are actually willing to share information in this space, which is a good thing.
Shirley, Rosemarie has a question. Do you want to take questions or want to wait?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Go ahead and unmute.
Hi, thank you. Just a quick question. I'm applying for the grower license, but I'm also going to be handling it. Do I need to apply for 2 different licenses?
Yes.
I do.
That was a short answer.
Because if you're operating 2 separate entities, right? Like if you're doing your cultivation on one location and then you're storing your hemp and your products on a different location, on a different site, and doing something different, then yeah, you do. If you're just cultivating and storing on your own property, then you don't need to get a license.
Okay, that answers it. Thank you.
Okay, good. Oh, looks like we got John up here too.
We got all kinds of people
I think
hopping in.
we got four more hempsters joining us. So I think everyone's in, right?
What I wanted to do, maybe,
So just to catch everybody up who just joined us, John, Anthony, Steve, and Jeff, Shirley's just giving us an overview. She was just going through some of the terms and conditions of the licenses while we get started. So Shirley, you want to go ahead and continue?
yeah, I thought like maybe I'd point out some interesting things that I felt was like noteworthy. So what the regulations actually say is interesting because I went to an event where somebody actually had hemp materials. The rules actually say that transporting live plants and any materials, whether they're products, to unlicensed areas, which means trade shows, county fairs, educational events, it's prohibited. And so it's happened in the past, but now that these rules and regulations are here, just be mindful of that. You know, everybody wants to do business and you want your products to be out there, but you just don't want to run afoul because you may look at a fine or a violation. It's not like you're facing, you know, criminal penalties, but you're certainly going to face a civil penalty, and you don't want to do that. Another interesting thing is, so, you know, Rosemary, you mentioned you wanted to get a license to grow. So if you already have an existing site in mind, if you want to change it, you would have to pay a fee to change it, to add it to your existing license. So when you're thinking about applying and you have your budget, just something to think about if you want to scale up into the state, because you can grow in multiple areas. And then the other thing, which is interesting, and it's kind of different from what the cannabis regulations are, but hemp licenses can't be assigned or transferred under any circumstances. And whereas with medical cannabis, there's some caveat, you have the ability to at least transfer. And so it's clear that hemp is being regulated by the Department of Agriculture. They're really looking at this like a crop, and cannabis is being regulated under currently Department of Health. So it's more medical. And so just to give you an idea of what the state is thinking about, and then on the New Jersey website, you can get a list. So if you want to start growing, you want to make sure that your seeds are compliant with the strains that are already allowed. And so the state of New Jersey has an entire list of acceptable varieties. If you have seeds already that are not on the list, you don't have to worry, because it's not necessary that they're non-compliant. They may just not have been considered. And so you can always submit your seeds and the sample to the State Department of Agriculture for approval. So that's just something to keep in mind. And then these are just some of the fees for the application itself. These are from 2020. They haven't been changed yet. The application fee itself is a flat $50. Again, stark difference to cannabis licenses where it's $20,000, $18,000 being refundable and $2,000 non-refundable, whether you win or don't win. And then on top of that, if you're a grower, the annual fee for you is $300 plus $15 per acre. For handlers, it's $450 annually. And then you can see the other categories. If you're doing oil processing or CBD extracts, it's an extra fee. So again, these are just things to keep in mind as you budget out your application, your plan. This number, so it says that growers should apply at least 30 days prior to your anticipated date of planting. And that's because the DA, New Jersey DA, is going to come in and actually sample and do all of that. And so that's just a timeline to keep in mind when you're planning your things out. John, feel free to hop in at any point. This is just some examples of, you know, what the application should include at a minimum, right? Again, it's really not that difficult. I think these applications get mixed up a lot with the cannabis RFAs, and then people feel like it's going to be a lot of work, it's going to be cumbersome, it's going to be really expensive, but it's actually not that expensive or cumbersome. Like these six basic points are really your application. It's simple stuff, right? What's your business name, your entity, legal description. Number 4 seems like it's hard, like geospatial location. All you do is go on Google Earth, you put in your location where you're applying, and you put a ruler, and you just map out different points, and you can figure that out, which isn't that difficult. And then the background check, right? So they haven't I don't know anybody that's been excluded yet, so I can't say what it is that they're looking for in these background checks. But typically, it would be any felony. I would say would probably disqualify you, because that seems to be the case, at least for the cannabis licenses. So these are what the applications look like. This is, I already mentioned this about the seeds. Again, if you're sourcing your seeds from outside of the list that's already approved, just make sure that you get written approval before you go out and purchase seeds and do what you need to do.
I have a question. I'm sorry.
No problem.
The background check. I just got the letter back in the mail. Do I submit that letter with my application?
From the state? Is it from Indigo?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's clear.
Okay.
Right. It'll just say that you ran your check, everything's clear, and you could submit that with your application. They'll run it for you regardless, but the fact that you already have it, it shows that you're already ahead of it. But the state will still run it regardless. I talked about sampling and inspections and things like that. So right now, New Jersey has its plan that says you cannot grow more than 0.3% THC, right? If you grow over that, you're considered non-compliant, and anything that's non-compliant has to be destroyed, unfortunately. But the US Department of Agriculture just published their final rule, and they upped that percent. They upped the 0.3 now to, I think it's up to 1%. So if it's up to 1%, you're not looking at a crazy fine like you were before, or forfeiture of your license, which is a positive. And so, not to say that you should grow up to that amount. I'm just saying you don't have to worry about facing the same penalties that used to be associated with it. And I'll share this as well, this presentation, for everybody here, so that you guys have this information. A lot of it is available on the New Jersey Department of Agriculture website, so I highly recommend taking a look at that, because it's actually really helpful. And then this is with the testing. So I mentioned testing about, your seeds have to be tested multiple times throughout different stages, pre-planting, once you do start planting, and then when you get even further into it. But right now, all of the lab testing, so it's been deferred, but starting 2022, the lab that you get your materials tested at has to be registered by the DEA. The DEA still needs to have their influence for some reason, but that's just something to know, because there's lab testing facilities out there right now that are not ISO compliant and that are not DEA registered, that'll give you a certificate of analysis, and you'll think that you're good to go because you got your test, but that's just something to make sure that the labs that you work with need to be registered with the DEA. And then I don't want to mention the other part. Okay. Negligent violations. I already mentioned this thing. A lot of this is going to change now that the federal rule has changed, because before, I mentioned, it was the 0.3% cutoff. Now it's up to 1%. And so all of these negligent violations are going to have to be modified based, on what's happening now. I wish that
Testing.
John, are you on? I want to be able to answer your questions before I keep going and talking more, because I want to be respectful of what everybody's existing knowledge is, and be able to actually provide more value versus just going over like the rules. Because if that's something you guys already know, then I don't want to waste time on that. I want to be mindful of that. So does anybody have questions right now?
This is Bill Vampka. I would just point out to you that 1%, if it's still above 0.3, it still has to be destroyed. It's just that it's not a negligent violation. I don't want anybody to get confused and think you can still sell it or possess it if it's at 1.
Exactly. Thanks, Bill. You're right. It's still considered, you still have to get rid of it. You just won't get fined for it the way that you would. John, hey.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Excellent. Okay. Got it all set up now. Hello, everyone.
Shirley, did you want to, do you have your contact information or anything that you can show us? And is that anything, did you want to add anything before you have to jet?
Yeah, I'll put it in the chat information. Yeah, and I apologize, you guys, that I do have to get going sooner than I thought because I have another event.
No, well, thank you so much for dropping in and for giving us your wise counsel and your experience with this. It's free. The first consulting is free, right, Shirley? No. Thanks very much again, and have a great evening. And there's Shirley's info as well.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And anybody that's looking to just connect for more free information, you can check me out at Blaze Responsibly. I'm on LinkedIn as well. I'm happy to help share any information, open up my resources to you for whatever it is, and just to have a conversation. So thank you, and I appreciate the time for you all.
no, thank you. Preston, you want to take it away and introduce John? Oh, you're still on mute.
Great. Yeah, we have John on the call today. Thank you so much for taking your time with us, John. As you guys has seen in the Facebook group, his profile was shared, and some of the links to check out John's practice as well. He's been really pioneering the hemp legislation here in New Jersey, really trying to help bring as much value to the hempsters, especially the farmers here in the state. So John, we're gonna have you discuss just a general overview of the program and some of the rules and regulations.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. I know a number of people on the call, so hello to the people that I know and haven't talked to in a while. Some of them are working in the hemp space, and a couple of them are from Rutgers. Thank you guys for your great work on the first grow season and some of the reports you produced afterwards. I was at something on Zoom, I think, and you guys did a great job. I didn't get to follow up with everybody. Preston had asked me to look at the applications from last year to this year and just sort of note anything that I saw differently. So I made some notes of that and I'll go through it. Administratively on the application is still a $50 non-refundable application fee. You'll find that the application's a fillable PDF only. And I'm sure we all know this, but it bears repeating to keep a copy of your application. And if you send anything in, like the check, and you send it by mail, make sure to track the mail. I'm up in Newton, New Jersey, by the way. That's where my law practice is. And I've had terrible problems up in Sussex County with the mail. And I've had things that, a couple of things didn't get to me for months. They got waylaid somewhere. So keep that in mind. The application, Rutgers will like this, clarified that the IHE research plan only applies to institutes of higher education. So they made a modification, I guess, to make that clear. People must have been confused. On the New Jersey State Police background check, if you applied last year and you need to do, or if you're applying this year, you'll see that it's not part of the application package. And I think I know why they did that, to sort of pull it out and indicate it is different. What you need to know about that, and I think where there's confusion, and I run into it in other areas of law, firearms ID purchaser cards and also expungements, is essentially there's a website for a company called Identigo. The application says the parent company is IDEMIA, IDEMIA, but you go on Identico and make an application and you go get fingerprinted and it will send the report directly to the Department of Agriculture. So the main thing there is Identico is going to ask you for a certain service code, or it's going to have a list that you have to locate. And that's what that code does. That code tells Identico that you're going to send it to wherever, Department of Agriculture, your local police, state of Department of Education, if you're applying to be a teacher. And then your key at that point is just show up there and make sure you bring all your stuff that you need for the application, for the scheduled appointment where Identico fingerprints you. The definition of key participant, which is the persons that need to get fingerprinted, hasn't changed. So that's the same. It hasn't been broadened. The examples of prohibited activity are the same since last year. So take a look at those and make sure you understand what they are. I looked through pretty carefully. I didn't see anything changed remarkably in the fee schedule, except one thing that I'll come to. Transfer requirements are the same if you're transferring product in between pre-harvesting. Instructions for creating site maps is in the materials from the New Jersey Hemp program. Very useful. So what Shirley was hitting on before about doing the GPS coordinates, I've been through it with clients in New York, getting licenses up in New York under the 2014 Farm Bill. And the Google and the GPS coordinates can get tricky, and there's like 2 ways to do it. So it doesn't matter drilling down into it. Look at the summary of varieties, the varieties of concern and prohibited varieties. That's pretty much the same information from last year, hasn't changed. I thought, I'm going to turn, that's the basic administrative package. Otherwise, it's essentially the same. I looked at the grower license application and the processor handler license application. I'll say one thing I noticed that's interesting in both of them is they've removed the section in the official use section that forms have that have a check off of how they received it. Walk-ins gone. So that's our new normal, right? And postmark too, because I guess you're submitting the application on the fillable PDF. So here's something to watch for if you're growing this year, and if you grew last year, you'll understand this. This has to do with a fee if they have to come back out and visit again for pre-harvest samples or post-harvest compliance testing. Last year, it was $150 per location. That was the only word in it, was location. This year, it says variety, location, instance, and that's, so it's blossom. So they have to, depending on what they have to retest, it's obviously taking more time and involves more of their resources and time. So keep an eye on that. The premature harvest reports.
John, real quick. So I have a question about that. So will they send you a bill? I mean, how do you know?
Yeah, there's something in there about an invoicing, and you have to pay it, you know, so, or you could be suspended or whatever they do administratively, you know, so, yeah, they're going to invoice. It's, I did notice in there, you know, something about 30 days of NJDA invoicing or whatever the time frame is. I think it was 30 days. I'm going to put something on the radar that I think is for everybody, even if some people involved that aren't necessarily growing in New Jersey or have another entry into the space. But for all of us that are hempsters in New Jersey, for me, it's particularly of concern because my background is highly regulated industries, and that's what brought me into cannabis over 3 years ago now. And I've run into this issue. So it's one of those things that falls under the category of a lawyer, or as a lawyer, of it's not a problem till it's a problem. So this may not mean anything, but if it does, it's going to mean something. I think it's going to mean something to me at one point legally. But if you look on the grower license application, on page 9, there's question 21, where you're checking a lot of either you're making representations or you're confirming that you understand rules for participating in the program. And question 21 has you consenting as part of being licensed and participating in the program that pretty much anybody, Department of Agriculture, a broad list, police, whatever, law enforcement, etc., drug suppression units is a word in there. It's a broad category. And it says may enter onto all premises where industrial hemp, that's a typo, right? We changed that, or other cannabis plants or materials. Okay, forget just, and anything is, it says located or licensed to be located. That's actually an important distinction. And hang on to that, because I'm going to come back to that. So that's really the only thing that's changed in the grower license application, nothing involved or exquisite. On the processor handler license application, the regulations, which is in the New Jersey Administrative Code, which you can access by typing in New Jersey Administrative Code and either the section number or just put it in, and it's for free. And it comes up under, I think it's Thomson Reuters, which gives Westlaw, which is what I pay for, but they give it for free. It's some sort of agreement with the state. So you can get that on the internet. But in definitions, which is a section 2:25-1.2, take a look at the definition of handle. And if you're getting a license for a processor or a handler, particularly, but it could apply to processor, just make sure you understand what the definition of handle is. We don't need to drill down into it now, or it could be for another time. But Shirley and I have had the conversation. There might be some activity going on in New Jersey where people really need to be licensed with a handler's license, and they're not. So just keep an eye out for that. All right, so on the processor handler license application, question 6 on page 3 just that changed a little because it spells out what you're paying for the scope and focus of your project. You know, you have grain, fiber. They did some good distinguishing between floral material, which is dried floral processing, and then under processor, they put cannabinoid extraction and hemp seed oil, if anyone's doing that. In the regulations, it's 225-2.1 if you care, not to be confused with 1.2, which was the prior one. It says, and it may even say it in the application, that you pay the sum of all of those. So if you're a processor and you're doing floral material and grain or whatever, you know, you add up the amount. You don't just pay one fee. On page 11, there's two questions there, 24 and 25, if you're a processing facility. And one of them, again, has, if I'm participating, NJDA staff and the police may enter on premises where hemp or other cannabis plants or materials are located. And then there's 25 where it says, I confirm my written consent by applying for NJDA personnel and hemp production location, that they can enter any hemp production location. All right, here's where that becomes an issue. And here's where you want to compare it. And if you're drilling down into the details or you have a problem with this, consult your legal expert or call me and I'll talk to you about it. In the administrative code 225-5.1, it says as a condition of licensure, you shall permit, etc., to enter onto all premises where hemp is cultivated, handled, or processed. That's different than located, isn't it? So where that's going to come up is, generally speaking, by the way, where this fits into my experience with highly regulated industries, is if you have a site that's licensed, you consent to search without a warrant. Okay, if you have a liquor license and you license a 100 by 100 box and a couple of offices in storage, then that's what they can come in and search. But if you have another location that's another business, their search can't go on there. And there's also some notion about warrantless searches under other circumstances. But I suspect it could become an issue for growers and processors and handlers when you have a situation that arises because the authority in these forms kind of exceeds what's in the regulations. And you have a search based upon, well, we saw what we think is cannabis product, therefore we're going in that room, even though that room's not on your GPS coordinates. It's kind of this simple way to state the issue. And I'm going to circle back to it because I know how much people love the Fourth Amendment when lawyers talk about it. It's not a problem till it's a problem. At some point, it's going to come up as an issue. It's come up in other highly regulated businesses, both the idea of what you're consenting to search or just a general warrantless search in general, because you're a highly regulated industry. I don't expect it.
John, I have a question. I'm sorry.
A problem immediately.
I'm sorry.
For anybody. Go ahead, Rosemary. Hi.
Sorry. The New Jersey State Police could just come unannounced and go onto the property and search with nothing, like just because they think it's not what I'm growing?
You're participating in a highly regulated industry. You have no right to that license. So whatever rights you have as an individual or a business, if you're not participating in an industry and you're just sitting there, fall under the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution. The searches can't be warrantless, they can't be unreasonable. That's the basic law. But if you're going to sign up and be in a program, you're going to follow the rules because you're given a license. A license is not a right, it's a privilege. So one of the obligations that they attach to the license is that the area in the regulation, the area that you demarcate, the area that you give GPS coordinates of, where you're conducting cannabis-related activities, it's subject to inspection by the Department of Agriculture upon demand, and also by the police, who can come in and view compliance with the law. And by the law, I mean statutes, regulations, program rules. It's a broad term.
And there's no notice or notification. They can just walk on the property or knock on your door.
Yeah.
But the New Jersey State Police, they have the knowledge of the difference of marijuana to CBD because they look very similar.
That's a great question, and that's a much bigger issue, which is why I say it falls into the category of it's not a problem until it's a problem. As a practical matter, I believe, and there's a lot of other people that can chime in on this, Connie, Preston, Jeff. I believe that in the same way that our Rutgers professors and that whole team really got on board very quickly about this plant once they, let them out of the gate, and said go. I think the police are catching on pretty quickly about the difference between hemp and cannabis marijuana. A lot of the stories you've heard from a couple of years ago were isolated, and I can tell you more directly. I've heard good reports from New Jersey. I'm thinking about New York. Obviously, New York, there's a lot more growing going on up there, but my sense is that I don't expect that to be much of a problem, except when it becomes a problem.
One thing to do, if you, of course, would be to be able to prove the provenance and to prove what you have there through seed to sale software or some sort of, again, tracking system or barcoding system. Jeff, you could probably pop in here and talk more about how you can do that. Say again?
To keep my paperwork on. I was thinking that, to keep the paperwork on the properties, that there's like a show what I'm growing.
At the very least, yeah, I would think you'd want to be able to say,
but
hey,
they wouldn't be able to come in. They wouldn't be able to come in and shut down the operation without having someone go there and test my crops first, right?
It's too specific an answer to give.
It hasn't happened yet.
Circumstances, yeah. It's factually sensitive, like a lot of these things are. The key thing is to understand, and anybody on here who's licensing and participating in that, to understand what it means to participate in a highly regulated industry. And it does mean something, and it does have consequences. I think the consequences in hemp are not going to be anything like cannabis, marijuana, obviously. I don't even think it's going to be like what I'm used to with liquor licenses, because I think people are coming around to, this is a crop and it's off Schedule 1. And the main thing is that it not be hot, or that you be sneaking, cannabis marijuana in on the back 40 or something like that on the location. So I think the inspections are going to be routine. So
yeah, I think it's more about controlling the black market or the gray market than it is about trying to bust hemp farmers, right?
Yep. And we get an indication, and Connie, you're plugged in more nationally, but with the pushback against the DEA, the DEA has said, informally, that this is not our priority to go in and bother hemp farmers. And I'm not aware of anything around the country that's happening en masse. So we'll see. But it's an issue, and it's what I noticed as an attorney.
Gaetano had a quick question too. Gaetano, you want to ask your question quick?
Gaetano.
Oh, maybe he's gone. He wanted to know, do they have a right to search a person's person if they're in your hemp field?
All Fourth Amendment jurisprudence, the broad law of it, is very fact specific. So generally speaking, under these requirements, it wouldn't extend to the person. But Fourth Amendment search, warrantless entry, search and seizure, there's a lot of caveats and buts, that type of thing. So if they walked in and they came in to inspect your licensed premises, no distinction that I made about, it's unclear, like where hemp is located, where cannabis is located, that's different than the licensed premises. Forget about that. Just go with the licensed premises coming in for an inspection, Department of Agriculture, and they bring an officer because they think there might be hot crop or there might be cannabis marijuana in there. If they started to see something going on with an individual, then that authority comes up, that authority arises. So I started this with the caveat that it's an issue. I think it will wind up being worked out. There's going to be some situation where some lawyer, me or somebody else, is defending someone in the state and elsewhere where this comes up. is certainly going to happen at some point. It's not something that you need to worry about or have you concerned about getting in the industry over it. I don't think it's going to be ubiquitous. So
Really good to know. Thank you for pointing it out. I think it's an interesting distinction. So we're about at 6:40 or so, John. Um,
I didn't notice anything else. I can tell you that mostly
okay.
everything is the same. There's not really anything else in there. I was just going to say the two things I had in my notes in red is with the seed or propagule request requirements. If you're looking to get a domestic seed on the radar, it's the deadline is 3 weeks prior to the transfer. And if you're looking for international product, it's the deadline's February 15th to submit that request. It's not far away. Part of that process is the department ensuring that intellectual property is protected. And this is another one of those issues that I can't comment in full on it. You can contact me off, the Zoom conference call or contact, your own attorney. But I'm just going to say, generally speaking, intellectual property is on the radar. Nationally, it's on the radar. It's an issue. And you don't want to be in the soup, and you could be in the mix, even though you have the seller, that you're buying the seed from or the clones, saying that it's intellectual property. So depending on the circumstances, you just want to know that it's not, affecting everybody all the time, but that issue is starting to pop up. And who's saying that they own all the processing? I just saw Canopy Growth, right? They're saying they've got IP rights to all of the CO2 extracting, all of it. They're
Really?
litigating against one company, and the claim it was a blurb in Hemp Today or someone like that. So I've got an IP cannabis attorney who's gonna look into that. So maybe we can get him involved. All right. Everything else, pre-planting, planting, harvest destruction is the same. Site modification request still $300. They removed from last year the requirement that you file with the USDA a crop acreage reporting form, the FSA 78, although it remains in the regulations. My guess is that you're already giving your crop reporting with the application, so they must just be sharing it with the USDA. If anyone knows what happened with that, it's not the biggest requirement in the world. They're not gonna, come in and take your license away because you didn't report what you're growing to the USDA, but it's just something that I noticed, and I was kind of curious about it. But I suspect, you usually don't have to report your hay when you get a license, so the application probably folded into whatever that requirement is. The only other reason I bring it up, it's not just a minute detail. It's important to report that. So if anybody knows anything specific about that, please chime in. But we want the USDA to know what we're doing here, what we're growing here. You want to report that because that's part of the grant money, the PPP money, some of just the bailout money. Other than PPP was based on salary, but just some of the funds that were being released. That can be an issue. So you want to be on the radar with that. But that's all I saw. It's mostly the same other than that.
Great. Well, I'd like to take this opportunity right now to introduce two of our Rutgers people here who have actually were the seeds in the ground guys from last year, and maybe both of you guys can say a couple of words about. First of all, introduce yourselves and then tell us a little bit about maybe what you're doing for this season. So hi Steve, nice to see you. Let's go ahead and start with you. So I'd like to introduce Stephen. Do you go by Steve or Stephen?
Stephen's fine.
Stephen's fine. Stephen is a county agent and the extension department head for Sussex County. So take it away, Stephen. What's up with you these days?
Oh, we're just getting ready for the next year. We Bill and I learned an awful lot. Primarily the pests and diseases that are going to impact this crop. I'll let Bill share some of the other concerns that we maybe generated this past season with the regulatory compliance issues. We did have some concerns with varieties and cultivars that did go hot. And focusing a lot of our energy on what we do with it when we are successfully growing it. Marketing is really shaping up to be something that we have to pay a lot of attention to. things that we maybe consider to be the markets that we were kind of thinking we would be moving towards as a state are switching. It seems a lot more interest in smokable flower than some of the oil components of the crop. And nationally, we're seeing a lot of interest in the grain and fiber market. As this crop becomes more and more like a traditional commodity, we're working with some folks from out in Colorado who are in the process of getting this on to where it'll be a tradable commodity eventually. And grain and fiber seem to be the direction that they're going to go. But that's really, we're learning an awful lot, especially with some diseases, and corn earworm was a really, not that we weren't expecting to see it, but we were kind of surprised at some of the insect pests that we found in the infancy of our production research.
Considering how hard it is for me to actually grow tomatoes in New Jersey that don't get diseases, I'm not surprised. So Gaetano actually had a quick question for you, which is, does the actual temperature in New Jersey and or any climate change have to do with hot hemp or hemp going hot? So just
really the way it seems, it's cultivar specific. But what we're finding out, and again, this is anecdotal 1 year research that we've done in New Jersey, a lot of it has to do with harvest management. So when it's ready to go, you have to get it. And we've couple cases throughout New Jersey that we were witnessing when it was ready, and right after the compliance testing and it passed, you need to get the crop out of the field and either to market or dried down or in your storage very, very fast. We had some mold issues come in that made not, I don't want to say contracted, because we're still trying to feel our way through what constitutes a real contract and not a handshake agreement. But folks had some arrangements for sale and had mold come in towards the end of the season, which made it not marketable as smokable bud. So there are certainly harvest considerations that we have to take into
right. I think one of our members here on our call here is Anthony Sorrentino, and he's one of our hemp farmers. And I think, Anthony, if you can hear me, go ahead and unmute and tell us a little bit about your hemp journey, because you had all of those problems, I think, right?
I did. Hi, everyone. Can you hear me well?
We can.
Okay. I had quite a bit of caterpillar. We had a little bit of mold, not much. A couple of things went hot, and they went hot fast. I had one test done and didn't meet the 15 days, and I wanted to pull it out, and they came and tested about a week after the 15, or 2 weeks after the 15 days. So even I think I'm saying that because I think the new rule is 30 days, but my test jumped from, I believe it was like 0.07 to 4.2 and 6 something, 0.6. So it was, and that was 2 specific strains. It wasn't like everything did it. So yeah, it was interesting, and it was fast. So it happened
I think Anthony's experience was pretty typical for a lot of hemp farmers, right?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. What you were saying, Anthony? I interrupted. My apologies.
Oh, nothing. Just that it went up, 0.3 points in under 2-3 weeks. So learning about these new strains, again, we only have 1 year. So what we've learned in the 1 year may be different next year, depending on the weather and some other things.
And did you have any issues or questions about applying for the license or any of the topics?
No, I'm just hoping that it does go up a little higher. Like you said, the testing, if it goes to 0.1, I think we'll all be a little bit more successful.
Fantastic. Cool. Well, thanks for chiming in, Anthony. So now I'd like to introduce Bill Bamka. Bill is a county agent and extension department head for Burlington County. Bill, what's up with you? And I know that you and Steve work closely together, but
Yeah.
you're in different farms or different locations? I mean,
Steve and I are
obvious.
actually running the same trials together.
Okay.
One of the things that's really going to be important is variety selection. Like Anthony said and Steve said, in a 2-week period, we went from compliance to non-compliance. So don't get greedy in trying to get the maximum CBD because it might bite you. Because Steve and I had a pretty big burn at the research farm where we had to burn the crop. And just so you know, on the application for the Department of Agriculture, they listed varieties that are no longer compliant or varieties of concern that were not varieties of concern last year. So they've revised their list. And the other list they told us in the meeting we had was they go off of Kentucky's list. So when you're sourcing varieties, take a look at those. Those are what they're looking for. The other thing is with the new federal standard in place that takes effect March 22nd in here. So it's going to affect, and we had a discussion with the Department of Ag. They have to submit the revised plan to the Department of Agriculture. Testing is going to be at 30 days prior to where you can start doing the testing. So you want to keep that in mind with it. But testing. I think Steve would agree with me. It can sneak up on you really, really quickly. We don't quite understand why it spikes like it does. There's some talk out of Cornell, it's genetics, but there's probably some environmental conditions. In our first year, we probably have more questions than we have answers now at this point after growing up for 1 year. And keep on track of the insect pests. If you're in an area where there's spotted lanternfly, we even found spotted lanternfly on the hemp. That's really not a surprise to us because spotted lanternfly also likes hops, which is a cousin of hemp. So those are some of the things. And the only other thing I'll tell you is it's not an easy crop to grow. There's an awful lot you got to keep track of. Foliar diseases, that was a big thing that we got hit with hard. And planting date. Steve and I got burned a little bit. We planted some of the stuff late and never got a harvestable crop out of it.
Rosemary, you have a question?
Yes, for the smokable flowers, do you suggest any non-chemical sprays that you could put on the plants to stop these pests from coming onto the crop?
I think that's going to be our research protocols for this coming growing season. In order for us to have to make a recommendation, we generally need to do 3 years of replicated studies. And we are definitely limited in conventional type chemistries to use on hemp so far. New ones are coming out. There are some organic type insecticides that are available, but we haven't really tested them for efficacy. The big problem that we're seeing with the corn earworm, it's actually a corn earworm tobacco budworm complex. They're notorious for getting into the buds or into the crop that they're infecting, and so we really need to be timely with management. And so that's going to be one of the things that we really have to pay a lot of attention to this growing season.
Yeah, the only thing that me and my husband did last 2 seasons that stopped some pests, we were in Connecticut, we weren't in New Jersey. We did garlic and water, and that seemed to help some, but not all the pests.
I think that isn't Nimi, Professor, I'm sorry, her last name is escaping me. She's doing a lot of research right now on pests, and she's going to have some coming out there.
It's actually looking at diseases.
Disease, okay.
Yeah.
The other thing
They are different, aren't they? Pests are creepy crawlies and diseases are fungus, right? So.
One thing Steve and I noticed though, that corn earworm or the borer, you really have to look at your plant. You can walk by it and not know you're infested with it. They get in there deep because it's such a dense bud. So it's one that you have to constantly be watching the crop.
So did either Steve or Bill, do you either of you have questions for John, or did you have any questions about or comments about the application process, or any follow-up on that?
John and I usually stay in pretty good contact, so.
How'd you make out digging out?
I'm still digging.
Yeah. We got a little bit of snow up here in Sussex County.
You
As a
guys
lawyer,
do.
can I sue myself?
I was out snowshoeing in it yesterday in Stoke State Forest, and
Oh, nice.
I easily had 4 feet that I was like sinking down into. Well, not completely with the shoes, but there was still 2 feet beneath the shoe. I was going up easily to my
Yeah, we had some drifts in some of the fields that were 4 feet plus.
And if the participants that are growing don't know, what if you guys don't know about the Rutgers website, the Department of Agriculture website, and without the link, just what's the Google search to get there? What's the quickest way to get
I'll
there?
put it up. It's the sustainable agriculture one, right?
Okay. Yeah, it's fantastic. It's really good.
And if we could do a shameless plug real quick,
Absolutely.
we are at the Vegetable Growers, what we traditionally call the Vegetable Growers Association. Bill and I are leading a session on hemp production. We will be spotlighting some of our research from this past growing season. We think we've got some pretty interesting stuff in relation to the architecture of the plant, how it correlates with CBD and THC concentrations, some of our variety studies, as well as everything basically that we've done as a team.
That's this weekend, right? This coming weekend, I think, or was it last weekend? No.
I hope not.
Oh, wait.
It's February 23rd, I think we are. 23rd.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. Sorry.
Is it
Yeah.
is it Zoom? It's not in person.
Yeah, it's going to be a
not in
Zoom.
person. Yeah.
It's a Zoom.
Is it NOFA? No.
No, with NOFA, we
That's
did,
I'm getting
so
them confused.
going,
Sorry.
yeah.
So it's the vegetable growers.
Yeah, it's New
Yeah,
Jersey.
it's what we call the
Growers
vegetable growers. It's the
Association.
mid-Atlantic something, right, Bill? It's something.
Yeah, it's the Mid-Atlantic Vegetable
The one
Conference.
that's in Atlantic City sometime.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
There we go. Too bad too. That's a fun conference in Atlantic
Open your
City.
browser to like a betting site while you're, so you can go and lose money on DraftKings while you do the Zoom conference.
Very good. So I just put the link there to the Vegetable Growers Conference in the chat. And which day are you guys presenting?
We have the 20. Which day are we, Steve? Tuesday?
I believe so, yeah.
Okay,
We're Tuesday.
good.
It's on the schedule, yeah.
Okay, well, excellent. Well,
We're in the morning. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, I know.
cool. All right, so we're pretty close to wrapping up. Preston, any last thoughts, comments, anything you'd like to say to the group? Oh, you're still on mute. Sorry.
Story of my life. Yep. Just great. Thanks for everyone for coming out, and I'll share some of the engagement that we got from the last year, so you can see how much the group has grown. I'll post that in the group momentarily.
Mm-hmm. Right, and a recording of this will be available through the links on the New Jersey Hemp group. And any final comments, John? Oh, you're still on mute. There you go.
Good luck this year.
Bill, comment?
I guess what we always tell everybody, start small. It's easier to make a small mistake than a big mistake.
And Steve, how about you?
I just can't focus enough on the importance of having a marketing plan. The commodities going in the commodity direction, which is usually lower prices, which means we have to be smart with our production costs, but know what you're going to do with the crop when you're finished with it.
Before you start.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, great. With that, that's all I've got. So thanks everybody for joining us, and I'll say goodbye. Preston, would you like to wrap up?
Yep. Thanks, guys. And we look forward to more events throughout the year.
Yes. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
Thanks, Connie. Thanks, Preston.
Take care.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, John. You did a fabulous job.
Yeah, it was a great presentation.
Bye-bye. Thanks, Rosemary. Good luck. Thanks, Anthony. Good luck.
Yeah. You. Good night. You too.
Okay.
Okay. Well, hopefully you'll be able to check out that Nebraska conference coming up. I think that one might be paid, but probably
that looked very interesting, and it was expensive though. It's like $365 for an online conference. I don't think so for Nebraska. So
Okay.
I'm not quite sure about that. Anyway, well, that's it. So either one of us is going to get the recording. Regardless, you can send it to me and I'll snip it and make it video presentable, and we can go from there. So good. That was pretty good. Went quick.
Yeah, I mean, ended early.
John did a fantastic job.
I'm very impressed with him. Yeah.
Makes me want to hire him as a lawyer. So anyway, thanks. We'll see you later. I'm leaving now. Bye-bye.
I said hi. Okay. Bye, Rosemary.